Hey, what's going on everybody? Rudy here with the Retro Universe, and today I'm going to talk about 10 of my favorite Game Boy games of all time. Now, we're not going to include any Game Boy Color games on this list, just original Game Boy games. And starting off at number 1 here, we have Pokémon Yellow. I originally played Pokémon Blue first when I was a kid, and then eventually got my hands on Pokémon Yellow with a yellow Game Boy Pocket, so that was really cool to have those together. Pokémon Yellow is a really great, third version of Red and Blue. It added more stuff from the anime, so a lot of people were intrigued by that, as you now had the option to have a Pikachu follow you around, just like Ash did in the show. You also had the ability to obtain Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur throughout the game. The game is still pretty simple on story. They add a few little extra things here and there, but it's just your general Red and Blue story with a few little added nuggets. You have Jesse and James from Team Rocket on the game now too, which replaced some of the older Team Rocket battles, which were just with like a generic Team Rocket enemy. So if you're going to look for any version to play of the original 3 games, definitely Yellow is your go-to. The one thing I will say though is you do not get to level up this Pikachu, so you don't get Raichu, and there are no other Pikachu in this version of the game, so you will need to do some trading or whatever else you got to do to get a hold of another Pikachu. You just can't catch any in the game. But yes, Pokemon Yellow is my favorite of the original 3. I recommend you check it out. It's a game that I go back to over and over again. Now, second on the list here, we have Super Mario Land 2. Yes, I absolutely love the first Super Mario Land for all its quirkiness and its wonderful music, but Super Mario Land 2 does everything better. Mario now looks more like Mario, Mario controls more like Mario, and now you get an overworld similar to Super Mario World. And you get a lot more levels compared to the first game, which could be beat in like 20 or 30 minutes. Overall, this game improves on everything from the first one and has additional abilities and such, and it just plays really, really good. So check out Super Mario Land 2 for the Game Boy. Now, third on the list here is Bomberman GB. Now, this is a very simple Bomberman game, but it does go back to classic Bomberman. I know they've been trying to make new versions of these games for newer systems, and they're just not great. They're not great like the old games from back in the day. This has a very simple adventure mode that you go through different ways to get through the levels. And then if you want to just play classic Bomberman, there's levels for that as well. You can play against AI so that it feels kind of like you're playing against real people, but you're not. But overall, it's a great experience. The music is pretty basic, but it's still pretty fun. And you do get also special abilities. I really wish they can go back to this classic style of Bomberman, because these were some of the best experience I remember growing up, especially multiplayer Bomberman. But if you're looking for something quick to play on your Game Boy, definitely check out Bomberman GB. Now, here we have Double Dragon. This probably is my favorite version of Double Dragon. Now, the NES version is great. Of course, that's going to be the #1 version that people play. But to have this version on the go, obviously they made several cutbacks compared to the NES one in order for it to fit on the Game Boy. But it still plays very, very similar to it. Obviously black and white, but you could still do all of the combat moves, everything that you could on the NES version. People even preferred this version compared to the Game Gear one, which had color and all these additional options, just because it was a better experience on the Game Boy. It is a really hard game though. Like, I can only get up to some certain levels because some of the boss fights can be pretty rough. I've watched walkthroughs of it and other people are really good at it, but for me, I cannot for the life of me beat some of these bosses. Now, it does have a multiplayer mode, but it is pretty dumb because it's, I guess you can say, think of Street Fighter without any of the cool moves. You don't get to go through the game with a second person. You literally just fight them with the basic moves the game has, and that's kind of about it. So they really could have left that out, as it's kind of pointless. And next we have one of my favorite Game Boy games of all time also is Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy. Now, this was the very first Kirby game that came out, so he does not have his absorption abilities to absorb abilities. He just has the ability to absorb that makes sense. I don't know. I think I confused myself there. Anyways, he doesn't have the ability to take the abilities of other enemies. He can just suck you up and throw you like a projectile. So it is very simplistic in that nature, but most Kirby games are, which is one thing I actually love about them. They're not too challenging. They're just a great fun experience. You have great music to listen to as you're playing the game. This is a short game. You can probably beat in 20-30 minutes also, so just know that going into it. But it's easily accessible if you're looking to buy a copy of it. They're still pretty cheap. And this is also before Kirby was actually pink. There was this whole lost in translation thing where the artist for the game made him white, and he should be pink, but he was white, but he should be pink. So yeah, this is the very first version of Kirby out there, but definitely check it out. Now, I don't know how many more times or how many more videos I'm going to include the Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy, but it's on this one as well because it is a great game to play. And surprisingly, there are people out there that do not know about this. But you know what? Go out there and find a copy of this game. The music is really good during the battles. And you have a small overworld to where you can walk between the gyms. You don't get a big overworld like in the original Pokemon games, but you get to walk around in the gyms, talk to different trainers, battle them, get Pokemon game packs, or card packs, I'm sorry, after you defeat enemies, and you go ahead and build your own decks with the, versions of Pokemon that you want on them, with trainer cards, energy cards, all that stuff. So it plays very much just like traditional Pokemon trading card game that you used to play back in the day. It only has the first generation of Pokemon, but you know what? That's fine because those are my favorite ones, because those are the ones I grew up with. But yes, I talk about this game a lot. I mention it all the time. There's still a lot of people that don't know about it. Do yourself a favor, go find a copy of this game. They're still pretty cheap, but it is also on the Nintendo Switch Online service, which you can play it on there as well. I believe it's on there. I think I saw it go on there, so go ahead and play that version if you can. But you can also play it on original Game Boy or a Game Boy Color so that you get these wonderful colored graphics. So definitely check out Pokemon Trading Card Game. Do yourself a favor. You're going to enjoy the game a lot, I promise you. Okay, I think that's the last time I'm talking about this game. Now, next on the list is what a lot of people refer to as Donkey Kong 94. The reason for that is it's just the year that it came out. This is another very great game. Now, it includes the original 4 Donkey Kong levels from the arcade, but it also goes on and adds a lot more levels. And this was a great start to what ended up becoming Mario vs. Donkey Kong and those games. But this one and the music, everything, it does get pretty hard the further you get into it, but overall, Donkey Kong 94 is always recommended by everyone anytime they get a Game Boy and they're looking for a game to play. It just plays fantastic on the Game Boy. If you are playing a Game Boy Color, you're going to get the added benefit of, color options and such, but it still plays great even on original Game Boy or Game Boy Pocket. I love this game. I play it all the time, and it is also one of those games you can just pick up, play 2 or 3 levels, and it does save, so that's great, so you can come back to it later on to continue playing it. Check out Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, also known as Donkey Kong 94. Honestly, this game is still pretty cheap if you seek it out on eBay or something, so you shouldn't have a hard time finding it because it sold really well. And again, you could play it on your emulator devices if that's the route that you're going to go with. All right, next we have another fantastic game, Link's Awakening. Now, this is the first version of Link's Awakening for the Game Boy. They eventually released a Game Boy Color, edition, I guess you want to call, that was Link's Awakening DX, which kind of fixes the colors, makes it look more like Link to the Past and everything, and it also adds an additional dungeon to the game that the original one didn't have. Link's Awakening did get remade for the Nintendo Switch, so if you want a more modern version of the game, you can definitely play that instead. If you want to play the classic version like this is probably the way to go. I will say though, some of the control issues are something that I always kind of fought with because you only have 2 buttons on the Game Boy. you are constantly switching your shield, your, jump attack, your sword, all that stuff. So you're constantly switching that stuff around. So that can be cumbersome sometimes. But again, it's a great Legend of Zelda game. It's pretty short. It won't take too long to beat, but it's great to have it on the go. You can also play this version if you get one of the Game & Watch handhelds that came out, the Legend of Zelda one. This game is included on there as well. And I think it's the classic version, not the DX version that's on there. But yes, Link's Awakening DX and Link's Awakening, overall fantastic Legend of Zelda game. Plays very similar to Link to the Past and the older Zelda games. If you never got around to playing this game, I highly recommend you seek it out and play it now. Okay, I know I already talked about Pokemon Yellow, and I talked about the Pokemon trading card game, and yes, there's a third Pokemon game on this list. I'm sorry, but they are just really great games for the Game Boy. Pokemon Gold and Silver are a fantastic next iteration of the Pokemon games that came out for Game Boy. Some will say they're probably one of the best versions of Pokemon to play anywhere. Heart Gold, Soul Silver also came out for the DS. Those are great versions of this, so if you could get your hands on those for a cheap price, which you won't, because people suck and they're really expensive, but so are these Game Boy versions, but emulate them, do whatever you got to do with them. Gold and Silver, I love that they introduced a day and night cycle, and I really wish they would come back to that on some of the newer games. Actually, I never played the latest games, so I don't know if they have that option, because I think those games were really bad from what I saw. But this is a great version to play. The new Pokemon that they added to it are still great. And again, the day and night cycle, the addition of having that radio option, not to mention what happens after you beat the Elite Four. I won't spoil it for you. I know the game's old, I could probably spoil it and no one will care. But it's a great thing what happens after you beat the Elite Four. Just more cool stuff happens. Anyways, I love the addition of the 3 new legendaries on this game. And then your, 5 legendaries, I guess you can call it, if you count Luigi and Ho. But yeah, it's an overall great game, Gold and Silver. Whichever version you want to play, they're both going to provide you a great experience. Just some different Pokemon, as all the versions have had before that. But yes, I know, I'm sorry, a third Pokemon game on my favorite Game Boy games, but there was a lot of Pokemon games, and a lot of them were good, some were not so great, but this was definitely one of the great ones. Probably of all time. Maybe, I think. Alright guys, we are in the end of it here, and as you can see, the last title I have is Tetris for the Game Boy. Tetris came included in pretty much every Game Boy back in the day, so there are thousands of copies of this game available for you to play at any time that you like. And I have to say, it is my favorite way to play Tetris. NES one is great, anything after that is fine, but Tetris for the Game Boy just gets everything right, from the music to the way it handles. Everything about it is fantastic. It just goes on and on. You just keep going until you can go no more. I play this all the time. It's something you could just jump into right away, which a lot of these games are great at doing that. I think that's what the Game Boy was really, really good at, is letting you just play for 10-20 minutes sometimes. Pokemon games or other longer games like Link's Awakening are great for longer experiences, but something like Tetris, Donkey Kong 94 and such are just great, quick little burst of game that you can play. So yeah, get Tetris if you don't have it. Find a way to get it. Like I said, there's dozens, thousands of copies out there for you to get your hands on it and play them on your Game Boy. Anyways, guys, that is gonna do it. What do you think of some of my favorite Game Boy games on this list? Of course, there's a bunch more that I'd like to include, but this video is already getting pretty long, and I will just wrap things up here. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite Game Boy games are. Did I miss any on here? What would you like to see and such? And if you're still playing Game Boy games, you know, they just released, I think, Donkey Kong Land 3 on the Nintendo Switch Online service. So definitely go check that out as well. But that's going to do it, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, please. I love you all very much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.